Today, we have our friendly neighborhood TikToker explaining something called microfeminism. Buckle up and get ready to lose some brain cells with me as we embark into the hellscape of the clock app.
Here's a list of things I do that are microfeminisms. I feel like probably a lot of you don't know that I'm an attorney during the day, so that's my 9 to 5. And I have a lot of little tiny things that I do that are microfeminism like acts. If you don't know what that is, long story short, it's like instead of just like standing up, burning your bra and screaming at people, it's like little acts that make men pissed off, and it's my favorite thing to do.
Okay, so we've already got a huge red flag. Feminism, at least in theory, is supposed to be about uplifting women and fighting for equality, not antagonizing or trolling men. Of course, if standing up for women requires doing something that might offend or upset some men, yeah, surely that's still feminist, but not going out of your way to antagonize the other gender, the very same people who you actually need on your side if you want your vision to be adopted in our society. So, girly here, really not off to a great start in my book.
Top of the list is if somebody says I have to talk to the board, or I have to talk to the chairperson of the board, or I have to talk to the CEO or CFO or whoever, I will say, let me know what she says. Always she, like my default is she or her instead of he or him. Obviously, unless I know the person and I know that it's a man, I don't go out of my way to be wrong.
So it's a little cringe, but I don't really care about this. Like, this wouldn't bother me. I will say, though, just as a statistical matter of fact, you say you're not going out of your way to be wrong, but you kind of are, in that the odds are in the favor that it's probably a man in those roles. So if you were going to pick one and assume, you'd have a better chance of being correct if you went with he rather than she. But honestly, like I said, not really a big deal. I'm not sure I'd even notice this if she dropped this in conversation with me.
This is an easy and obvious one, but saying MS instead of MISS or MRS, because MS period it doesn't mean you're married or unmarried. It means that you just like don't know or don't care as your prefix. I know some people will say Miss and Mr. and then like their names, but I don't go that far out of my way. But I will if I'm saying first names, like if I'm saying Jane and John, I'll say Jane first instead of saying John first.
Maybe I'm just like not a particularly observant person. I can be pretty absent-minded, to be honest, but I don't even think I would notice any of the things she's covered so far. So like far from acts of feminism that are like changing the world around you or whatever. I know they call them micro, but like, are they even micro or are they microscopic? Because I don't even think I would notice this stuff. You might be just overthinking it all a little bit, girly.
If I'm on an email with a bunch of people who do not outrank each other, obviously this is like if there's not a secretary, not a assistant, anything like that, and someone has to send like a calendar invite or a Zoom invite or something like that, I will ask the men in the group to send it, or like a specific man in the group, like, hey John, do you mind sending that?
So I've probably done this at some point. I'm honestly, I actually, no, not probably. I'm sure I have done this, but it's kind of petty to like ask someone else to make the invite for the meeting, because in the time you spend emailing them, asking them, can you make a Zoom meeting? Can you make a calendar event or whatever? You could have just quick as heck done it. Like, I do think it's fine actually and important to not always just assume that female colleagues should have to do whatever secretarial duties there are, like planning meetings or taking notes or anything like that. But then you should be rotating it regardless of gender, not sticking it to the men to always do. Like, that also seems bad and not really feminist in the real sense.
If a woman says something in an email, like they do some research and they have an opinion on something, and I think it's right, but I think more needs to get added, I will say, I think Jessica's 100% right. This is correct. I just want to add something like that. Like I'll affirm and then continue. But like if a man says it, I'll just say, I want to add, and I'll just go into whatever I'm going to add. And I think that part is just important because it's important to like cement, especially for women, to like boost confidence and just say like, hey, like call out to everyone else like, hey, they're right. They're smart. They're right. Anyway, I would love to know forms of microfeminism that you implement in your workplace.
So maybe I'm crazy, but I just don't really care about most of the things in these videos, and I don't really think I'd notice them. So I'm not sure how much you're really accomplishing, but if it makes you happy to do this stuff, knock yourself out, I guess. This was trending on TikTok, though, this concept of microfeminism, and some of the comments were really interesting. One person said, I make sure to tell our married men customers to discuss my offer with their wife before signing on the dotted line. The looks I get are insane and it fuels my heart. I don't know what job you're in, but if you're a salesperson, you should be just trying to get them to like sign no matter what, not trying to cause delays or possible roadblocks to them actually giving you the money. So your microfeminism might be coming at the expense of your job performance there, babe. Another person said, I got called Miss last name today by a disrespectful patient. I corrected him. It's actually Doctor last name. I do the same for female colleagues. So for me, that's not really a feminism thing, because a male person, that happens to men as well, might happen more to women, to be honest, but regardless, I think that's just appropriate to stand up and say, no, I'm a doctor. Trust me, doctors, my boyfriend's a doctor. They go to school for a very long time to become doctors, and it is only fair that you refer to them as such. And so I think it's perfectly fair to point that out to anybody, regardless of gender. So, yeah. Another person says, when a group of male coworkers complete some kind of project or presentation, I say, great job, gentlemen, or great job, boys, in the same way professional men say, great job, ladies. Again, Cupcake, you might be overthinking it. Like, I wouldn't care if somebody said, great job, boys, to me. I'd be like, thanks. Like, that's not offensive. Like, you're just going out of your way to obsess over tiny things in a way I don't really think is productive. Another person said, at college, whenever somebody would ask if I was going to the blank game tonight, I would always continue the conversation, assuming they were talking about the women's team, until corrected. Okay, that's just obnoxious, because if we're being real, we know they're probably not talking about the women's team. Another person said, as an attorney, if I log into a Zoom deposition or hearing, if my male opposing counsel is on first, I always ask if they are the court reporter, unless I know them. See, again, like, that's just antagonistic and obnoxious. You know they're the opposing counsel. You know they're not the court reporters, so why are you purposefully misidentifying them? Another person said, I work at a call center, and when dads don't know their security code, I get to ask what's the middle name of your oldest child, and they never know. Bruh. If you're a dad and you don't know that, I'm giving you the side eye. Now, the hilarious thing about this microfeminism trend on TikTok that is on the Clock app, you are never, and I repeat, never woke enough. The far, far left of TikTok came and attacked and criticized these liberal feminists, or these center left or left wing even, but just not far, far left feminists, and said that from a Marxist feminist perspective, their microfeminism was actually problematic. And I never thought these words would come out of my mouth, but I think I actually kind of agree with the Marxist feminists. Let's take a look at what they had to say.
Microfeminism. That's certainly not a term I thought I would ever see floating around on this app. And as a Marxist feminist, pop feminist, liberal feminist, stop. If you're not in the loop of TikTok feminist trends or movements, whatever you want to call it, like I certainly am not until last night. Let me give you a little insight. So there's a bunch of corporate girlies who are doing very, very, very small actions that are kind of giving like her story, not his story vibes, and writing it off as like feminist praxis. I think my main critique of it is that it's an attempt to be subversive, and I think it's just far too subtle. I think big picture, it's not going to have any sort of real impact, material impact. That might be a more concise way of putting it. But I also don't think that the men on the receiving end of this are going to know what's happening. And I think that's a problem, because that's who you are meant to be challenging, and like their ideology of like patriarchy that they have just been so deeply seeped in our society. Like, it's not doing anything to combat that. And also, I don't think it's opening up the floor for enough questions as to why you're doing those things.
So in the full video, she definitely goes on to say some things I don't agree with. But as far as I'm concerned, at least in part, I agree with the Marxists. Like, the big problem with the microfeminism trend on TikTok is that it's micro. It's super duper micro, and they end up obsessing over things that really don't seem to matter and don't seem to actually make any sort of meaningful difference. The only slight way I could see them having an impact is to antagonize men in some circumstances, which I'm not really sure helps women, to be honest. I love these stories where the intersectional woke people kind of eat their own and fight amongst themselves, and then us normies can just kind of munch the popcorn and try not to lose too many brain cells while we watch them fight. Anyway, let me know what you thought of that TikTok and that fight between the corporate feminists and the Marxist feminists, who you side with. I'm honestly really curious for all of your thoughts. Don't forget to like, subscribe, yada, yada, yada. And with that, I'll see you all in my next video.